Experiences that brought me here today, and I'm not accustomed to this, as you can imagine. A lot of veterans keep their stories close and share mostly in the company of other brothers and sisters that we perceive will be the ones who will understand those stories. While this is always a joy and it keeps us close, I'm always cognizant of making sure that the stories do not get lost for the lack of telling. I've dedicated a good portion of my life to telling the hard stories in many aspects of my life in hopes that it may help others. As Mahatma Gandhi once said in one of my favorite quotes, the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. So in order to understand my desire and my drive for service, you first must understand that it is in my blood, and despite my best efforts, it may have been inevitable. My father's father was an immigrant from Ireland and served in the United States Army during World War II. He unfortunately lost his life in the Battle of the Hurtgen Forest in 1945, just months before the victory was declared in Europe. My maternal grandfather also served in the Army during that time, along with his mother, my great-grandmother. I didn't know much about that grandfather's service until after he died, because he was not one to ever talk about it. I learned later that he was in the Battle of the Bulge and other engagements that I had only read about. One story that he did tell was how he wanted to ride motorcycles in a specialized unit at the time. Somehow his mother used her rank and influence to prevent this, as she thought motorcycles were dangerous. My grandfather was subsequently assigned to a glider unit with the 17th Airborne Corps, arguably one of the more dangerous assignments at the time. Maybe motorcycles aren't all that bad. Service in the family continued with my father, who joined the Army and served as a tank commander in Germany. His little brother, my uncle, also served in the Marine Corps during that time, having lied about his age to serve. My father went on to serve for 37 years as a police officer in Boston, retiring in 1999. My father was immensely proud of the service of our family to his own qualification. He is to this day good for a story about his many years of service, and I'm blessed to still have him around to tell those stories. So as you can see, service is something that was ingrained in my mind as an honorable thing to do. As for me, I always knew that I wanted to serve. I didn't know how or exactly, but I believed that it was the least I could do to give back to this wonderful country and its citizens that had given me so much. In 2001, I was in my senior year of college studying music education, and I had made the decision that it was time. We were in an era of peace, and I decided that I would serve my time in the United States Army Reserve. I signed on the dotted line on the Army's birthday, June 14, 2001, and went off to basic training shortly thereafter. That's when things get interesting. I graduated basic training on September 9, 2001, 2 days before the world changed. I watched it change from a classroom at UMass Lowell studying Shakespeare. Those of you who were around at that time remember how hectic things felt and how helpless we all felt in the light of those terrorist attacks. I knew, however, that I had just put myself in a position to be able to do something. I was assigned to the 325th Military Intelligence Battalion, and we were quickly activated to backfill the positions left vacant by the 525 Airborne Corps, who was sent to Afghanistan in 2001. After a year, the fight in 325 returned only to be activated again in anticipation of an invasion of Iraq in 2003. In March of 2003, I found myself in Kuwait, sitting on the border of Iraq, waiting for the order to cross over. At this time, Saddam Hussein was still launching Scud missiles at our camps from his side of the border. I did a lot of growing up at that time, sitting in a concrete bunker in full chemical protection gear, just waiting for the beautiful sounds of those Patriot missiles doing their job. We received our go orders in the middle of the night and started the long journey to Baghdad as part of the initial invasion, the tip of the spear. The next few days were a blur as we drove nonstop, fighting our way to the Baghdad International Airport, where we stayed briefly before setting up shop in one of Saddam's old palaces just outside of Baghdad. It may sound glamorous, but I assure you, this time there was no infrastructure, and we only found shelter in those buildings. Ask me sometime about our toilet facilities and what it was like to spend a few hours a week standing over a burning barrel. I was quickly promoted to the rank of sergeant after only a few years in, and was placed on a convoy security team that went on over 200 missions in our time in Iraq, never losing a person under our protection. We were quickly one of the more requested teams in the area for that kind of work. It was a tough year. We lost some friends, but we made lifelong bonds that are still shared to this day, and we recently had our 20-year anniversary, as if no time had passed. I returned home in 2004 and find myself a bit lost. I hadn't completed college, and the thought of going back at that time was not something I could bear. Everybody I knew had already graduated and moved on. Luckily, with the Army, I was able to go on orders for several years. At that time, I was a counterintelligence special agent working at Fort Devens doing a number of tasks there. It was during this time that I met my lovely wife and we started our family. We moved to Chelmsford in 2005 after doing a lot of research about the best places to raise our family. A decision that we have never regretted. And I have now lived here longer than I have lived anywhere else in my life. Time passes, and in 2009 I received information that the 82nd Airborne, that they were going to Afghanistan and they needed seasoned counterintelligence agents for their mission. It was time for me to go again. This time, however, it was more difficult in some ways. I was no longer a young, single man. I now had a wife and 2 daughters at the time that I was leaving behind. While this was made easier by technology of the time, it was still difficult on all of us. My middle daughter, Madeline, turned 2 while I was in Afghanistan and thought for a long time that I was just a man in a box who would talk to her from time to time through a computer screen. I loved my job and it was very fulfilled by the work I did in Afghanistan, most of which will remain classified for a long time, but I realized that it was time for me to move on as I wanted to be with my family. After returning home, I transitioned out of the Army after 10 years and into a civilian role teaching as a senior instructor at the Army's counterintelligence school. I found that I loved that job and teaching suited me. There was, however, something missing. It was the service part that I was missing. I realized at this point, after trying to avoid for years becoming like my father, not because he was a bad man, he's the best. I just wanted to forge my own path and not be a copy of him. However, I realized after some soul searching and figuring out where I excelled, that police work was a way that I could continue the kind of service and stay close to my family. In 2012, I started my journey as a police officer with the town of Chelmsford, a decision I have never regretted. I love my job and only wish I had found it sooner. There are hard days doing this work, but my fellow officers and I go and do it every day with dignity and respect for each other and the people that we encounter in every walk of life. We have an outstanding department, and I'm honored to serve alongside each and every officer here. I'm also grateful to be able to raise my children where I know that they will be taken care of by anyone they should happen to encounter. Service comes in many forms. This is mine. I want you to understand, though, that my story is not unique. There are many men and women in the ranks of the Chelmsford Police Department, the Fire Department, the EMS services, every walk of life, who have similar stories of service. We're among you every day. We're called to serve. I hope to continue to do so as long as I am able. Special thank you to my daughters, Eliana, Madeline, and Leora, for bravely putting up with everything that my service has brought to our family, both good and bad. And lastly, to my wife, Diane. She's the rock that holds my family together and the support that I need to be able to do what I do. Today is her birthday, and I'm always grateful to be able to share this important day with her. On behalf of all the veterans here today, I just want to thank you all for your support. I also want to say the same on behalf of the Chelmsford Police Department. We have been very lucky to serve in a community that supports us the way that you all do. Thank you.